Hi, comrade. Welcome to our podcast series. These episodes feature the best of Lab-Left, an international forum organized by Szikra Movement in collaboration with Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We gathered in Budapest in November 2024 in order to discuss how to win from the left. Thanks for tuning in. This special episode was created by Szikra Movement.
So, hi Lee, thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
I would like to ask you, what's your history, what's your background in politics, and how did you end up an education minister? How did you end up now in the European Parliament?
Well, my background is that I was elected into the Finnish Parliament in 2015, and before that I was involved in a lot of different movements. I was involved in the youth movement of the party, but also in the student organizations. We had a big organization against the law reform of the universities and so on. So when I started in Parliament, I started in the committee that was dealing with educational policy. And in that time, we had quite a right-wing government that were doing really big cuts in education. So education was actually one of the main political themes during that whole period in Parliament. During those 4 years, we were all discussing a lot about education policy. And then during this time, I was also elected party leader. So in 2019, when there was a new election, and my party got a good result, and say the opposition parties got a good result, so we formed a government together, which was the most progressive Finland has had during my lifetime. I got to be the Minister of Education, so I could then kind of continue my work, but then as a minister. And then, as in politics quite often, there was a new election. In 2023, we had a shift of government again, back to a very right-wing government, and I was elected into the European Parliament in this summer. So now I'm continuing my work in the European Parliament. I am in the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs, so it's a little bit more labour market, but there's a lot of discussions around skills and education from a labour market point of view as well. So I feel that I can also use kind of my experiences from working with education issues in this role that I have now.
And can you tell me a little bit more about what your party is, what your party stands for in case of education?
Well, my party is called the Left Alliance from Finland. We are kind of a modern left party, red-green. So we, of course, you can say that kind of the main common ground ideology values for all of our members, of course, has to do with changing our economic system in a more equal way, defending public services, more equal distribution policies in society, defending people with low income. We also have an ambitious line on climate and environmental policy and human rights issues. And on education, one of our main demands was to increase investment in education, because Finland has gone through very many periods of austerity. This was kind of one of the main demands in 2019 when we started, was to start increasing funding for education on all levels. We have also worked a lot for increasing the status of vocational education and training, also to ensure that it's of high quality. We did a reform prolonging the obligatory compulsory education age till 18, to also increase employment rate at a later stage in life for many. And we've also been very active on issues regarding early childhood education and care, like to get better working conditions for the people working there. When I was the minister, we also introduced the same laws for special needs education, for early childhood education and care, so it would start in time before the primary education. And on top of this, you can say that increasing equality in education is like another very big important topic for us, which is also linked to fighting segregation in big cities and on quite a lot of structural education policy issues that are hard to explain also to a Finnish public. But there are, Finnish educational scientists have pointed out that we have structures in the education system which actually increases inequality that we have been very active to address. Okay. Just to mention a few.
Just to mention a few, but these are all amazing. Is the school system in Finland is everywhere free, right? As far as I know.
Yes. Early childhood education and care, if you're a high income earner, you pay for that, but otherwise it's free of charge. There was a system on upper secondary level where you had to get your books and material yourself, but we changed that when we were a government, so it became completely free of charge for everyone.
And what the segregation is based on? Is it based on...
Segregation in Finland, so the education system on primary level the vast majority is public schools, and there's no tuition fees, so we don't have that kind of school segregation. But the segregation issues that we work with has to do with the development where city planning creates, situations where you will have well-off rich people living in certain areas of the cities, and then you will have people with lower income or more unemployment living in other areas. And when then families go to the school that is the closest to their homes, this of course also then reflects into the reality of the school. So you will have certain schools where children are from predominantly migrant background, or you have much higher rate of unemployment, lower educational level than in other areas. So the big kind of topic in Finland has been, how do we do city planning in a way to kind of try and stop this kind of segregation from happening, where you have very different, people with different income living in different areas, and B, when a situation like this has happened, how do we address it with educational policy tools? Because then you will have children with quite different needs going to different schools.
I would like to jump to the situation. I think it was not the first time I heard your name, but one of the first time I saw your face and I saw a video of you was that when you had a children's press conference at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was a really emotional press conference. Children were asking you questions about, it was for them a really big shift. The schools were closing because of the pandemic. They were not seeing their peers on an everyday basis. And you were talking directly to them about an issue that affects them the most. And for me it was really surprising, because politicians usually only talk to adults, but you do talk to children as well. Why this practice is important for you?
I'm so happy that you noticed or know about it, because it was a really important moment for me too. We did a few of them, but I think especially the first one was very emotional for everyone that was involved in it. I don't actually remember anymore whose idea it was originally, but I think it was very much in line with the way we wanted to communicate politics in that government. When we started the whole government, we had also a tour of libraries. So we just invited people to come and discuss the government program with us in libraries, like all over the country, and I loved that as well, because it was very easily accessible. It was like open for everyone. And on this press conference, I mean, the idea was exactly as you said, if especially in the left, if we want to be serious with this kind of phrase about nothing about them without them, that we also need to think about how we communicate directly to the youngest citizens of our societies that are equally important and also have equally important questions or comments for decision makers. So we decided to do this press conference where the ministers answered questions from children and also told them about why we had to do what we had to do when we closed down the schools and put other restrictions for hobbies and so on. But it was really emotional, because I think they knew and we knew what a big cost and price children and young people were about to pay for the pandemic. And I also remembered when in the end we opened up the schools again, because in Finland we had a full closure the first 2 months of the pandemic, and after that we changed the policy, so we didn't do like national closures, but we tried to do like local ones, just because we also knew that the negative consequences are so big. And I remember after we reopened the schools after that first spring, it was quite a challenging thing for me as a minister, because the teachers were opposed, the teachers' union, so they didn't want to go back to teach. The special education teachers were of different opinion, but the teachers' union was opposed. But we told them anyway that, you know, the health authority says it's okay to go back, then that's what we do. And I got a letter to the ministry, like a very big one, and I was like, what is this? And I opened it up, and it was 2 classes of children in the 2nd grade, where every one of the children in the 2 classes had written me a personal letter, you know, and they're not super good yet at, you know, expressing themselves in writing, so there were a lot of pictures and very cute kind of phrases. And all of them had written me these letters about how happy they are to be back at school. And it was also super emotional. I still have it at home, and I remember I was sitting in my office and crying as the minister, because I don't think anyone has ever really been able to express the importance of schools as communities, as well as the children in those 2 grades did in their letters to me after the school closures. Traditionally, Finland used to be a country where you had very small socioeconomic differences between children in school. So historically, because Finland was a very rural country with a very big, quite poor working class originally, and what the Finnish education system did after they decided to have one common system for all in the late 60s, so they introduced one public system for all, not any segregation, that the educated students go somewhere and the rest somewhere else, was that you really saw the power of education in eradicating existing differences of class background between people. And in society, you actually have quite few tools that do that. Like if we do, like we all want to have, labor unions is another, but if we want to have, for example, we all want to have a good level of our social security, for example, but it doesn't really change the actual kind of class structure then. Just make sure that the people who are not employed or get a low wage, that they get enough to live on. But you also need these powerful tools in society to lift people, to increase social mobility, so that if you're born into a working class family, you can still become whatever you want. And this was the kind of power of education in the Finnish system traditionally. And the most worrying trend, and therefore also kind of the biggest issue, I think, for us, is that nowadays the education system is not as good as it used to be on this specific task. So you can kind of see that the socioeconomic differences, they stay. And there was also a period where they grew, which means that the education system is not as good as it used to be in increasing social mobility. And nobody really also of the researchers say that nobody can actually pinpoint to one or two reasons why this is. They say that they don't really think it has to do with educational policy in itself, but more about with how society around the schools have changed. And also talk a lot about attitudes towards education, that they are changing as well. So traditionally in the working class, families pushed their children into education. It was really important that you need to educate yourself to get a better future than we had, this kind of thinking. And that has changed quite a lot, I think, in many Western countries, that there are other types maybe of there are other values also among many working class families, which is also connected to, you know, people not reading books that much, and, you know, issues that has to do with participation in society and so on. So for me personally, this was kind of the one issue that I thought about the most, like how do we change this and with what tools, and that I think is also the most important question for the Finnish education system.
And as a representative in the European Parliament, are you still having this question in mind constantly on a European level?
I do, even though, I mean, education especially is quite strongly like national competence, but I have been invited to quite a lot of talks and events regarding education, so it's still something I want to continue to work on, although maybe the tool set is a bit different. But I think one of the main takeaways actually for me was exactly what the educational researchers in Finland said, that if you want to know why this is happening, you shouldn't just look into the school, but around it. And I think if you look at the EU, like one big challenge for the left is like, how do we push that massive machine to do at least something on the social policy part, like for a progressive social agenda? If decision makers wanted to, the EU could do quite a lot also in this sphere. The power relations at the moment in the EU are very like favorable to the right wing. So I think this is going to be like one of the major projects for the next years, is just to kind of push it and push it and push it, you know, for some social agenda also on the EU level. Because EU has power if it wants to, also to kind of steer and push member states to do more on social exclusion and inequality.
Another thing that the far right is doing now is taking the question of special need kids and instrumentalize it to far right agenda. Just to say an example, like Robert F. Kennedy is now making points on there are more special need kids than there were before, and it is because of vaccination, and he's running anti-vaccination campaign. So they do instrumentalize it, and it is an important question, and it is really scary how they use it to, you know, like to monger fears and to evoke fears in society. So how could the left do something about these children now?
This is such a good question, because I see the exact same developments also in my own country, where we have a far-right party in government right now. And when I was Minister of Education, I also tried to follow like how does the far-right, because I think they were kind of grabbing onto the education policy agenda during those years. And I mean, in their way of explaining the world, I mean, they have a way of presenting the world as, you know, we are on the brink of total destruction. That's always how it goes, you know. The world is, traditional values are disappearing, and, you know, all of this, everything that was good and kept us and made, you know, that made sense in the world is disappearing, and it's because of the woke left, and it's because of these traditional values being eradicated, blah, blah, blah. And in Finland, I think they instrumentalize students with special needs in the same way. It's not linked to vaccinations, but it's more of this, you know, school is woke. You know, Finnish primary education is woke. It has been destroyed because, you know, we got too soft. Teachers are too soft on the students. They're all using their mobile phones. You know, this mobile phones is also a symbol for the modern Western world. You know, how we are all doomed to be destroyed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just so funny. Like Fidesz just banned phones from school.
Exactly, but it's the same everywhere. I mean, they are the same everywhere. There's always this small, you know, might be small differences in rhetorics on this or that issue, but, you know, the essence of it is the same everywhere. And what this leads to, I mean, they stigmatize students with special needs. And they kind of propagate an anti-inclusive education policy, which, you know, basically they are saying that move away all the special need kids from the normal classes or even the normal schools to their own, you know, groups or classes. And at least in a Finnish context, our experiences, especially from special schools, are not good because that kind of separated, excluded way of you know, organizing education for students with special needs usually does increases problems and also mean that they don't have, you know, I don't know how to phrase this in English, but like traditionally in Finland, like one good part of the primary education was that we didn't have, you know, the students with more problems in separate groups than the best ones, but they were all together, which based on research also kind of lifted up everyone. So it was like good for the average in the class in terms of learning outcome to have the best students and the ones struggling the most together. And this doesn't, if you would just put everybody away in their own schools and groups, so this principle doesn't apply. And I think it's also, I mean, this time that we live in, they stigmatize and make it sound like it's unnormal. It creates this very narrow picture of how you can be as a human being, like, or you know, a child, in a way that I think goes very strongly against a lot of the work that was done for a very long time in Finland as well as all of Europe for inclusive education, where, I mean, the idea was that we are all different and we all have different, you know, needs when it comes to learning. And the kind of goal of the education system should be to try and accommodate those needs for all students, not just send off the ones that need more. I don't know if I explained this like clearly, but that's kind of what they are doing. And in Finland, I think it's 1 in 4 children that have some kind of decision on special needs. It's a huge number. It is impossible to separate all students who have some kind of need for special support for their learning into separate groups or schools. In addition to that, very many of them do not, you know, disturb anyone else or, you know, act out or anything. So this whole stigmatization is not based on anything. Having said that, the problem is that we have a real problem in Finland that has to do with lack of funding for special needs education. And this is something that the left, we try to talk about this all the time without saying that we need to compromise on the whole principle of inclusive education. Like, the problem is not the principle of inclusion, the problem is that if we don't fund it enough, then it's not beneficial for anyone, not for the students, not for the teachers, and so on. But they, in the right wing, they are of course not interested in funding. They are only interested in stigmatizing the students. So they have kind of tried to occupy this whole debate without actually saying that they are ready to also put the funding where it's needed.
Talking about special needs children is really difficult because each and every child is different.
Exactly.
Often, I think that what's strange is that the right has the political narrative for it and the left somehow seems to lack this political narrative.
I mean, I was, as a minister, when I tried to tell them again and again that when you are saying what you are saying here, you have to remember that this is a debate concerning every 4th child in a Finnish school. So you cannot go out and say that they are all something, because they are all individuals, and within that group there's like a multitude of different, you know, children with different needs, and very many of them are fine in the, you know, the class with everyone else. Some of them really need education in smaller groups, and then of course our resources should also be enough for us to accommodate those needs. But I think also in this they were like, the counter attack on me was that this is also kind of the woke left being soft, you know, that we should just kick out the ones disturbing, you know, everyone else, and that's, you know, what should be done, and not this wokeness of the left. Once again showing, I think, the challenges we have on many debates when we are focusing on issues that are structural or financial, and they are focusing on issues that are just very easily understandable.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, so I'm going to start from further. In Hungary, the education policy research centers have been demolished, basically. There's no way for someone who is interested in education politics to learn, to inspire, to, you know, we have some education policy understanding people who are like speaking out loud and against the Orbán agenda, and the Fidesz agenda, but still we lack the inspiration often. And what I would like to ask you about is that where do you find inspirational school systems? Is there any kind of examples you're looking up to when you're making decisions on certain kind of education topics? Do you have like great examples you look up to?
That's a very good question. I think one place I found inspiration from was actually talking to researchers, because there's a lot of very good educational policy research still being done in Finland, and many of them are interested in these topics that have to do with equality, for example. So I was a lot, when I was invited, you know, to come and speak on their seminars or so on, I always try to go, because I think I drew a lot of inspiration from that. It's actually a very good question, because I think if I would just have to pick one system or like a country or something, I don't think I could be able to do that. Just maybe a lot about, you know, that everybody is dealing with the same problems in a way.
Everybody is actually in Europe looking up to Finland.
Yeah,
like you are our example countries. This is why I'm asking.
I know, yeah. I think there are a lot of choices that were done right in Finland a long time ago. And one of them was actually also that we focused a lot and invested a lot in teachers, that the teaching profession should be an attractive one, that they all have master's degrees from university, they are quite well paid, you know, not super good paid, but it's still a fine salary. So I think Finland just should also remember the things that worked, you know, and try and continue to focus on that. I really honestly believe that one of the biggest mistakes we did, that we cut funding for education for so long, because that also made the working conditions for the teachers much worse, and with bigger groups and so on. And then there are a lot of projects that are interesting. For example, when I was the minister, I tried to kind of find out how different other like Nordic countries have arranged education for students and children with migrant background to support their language learning. We have a system where they will get teaching in their own mother tongue, as well as in the Finnish language and so on. But there were like different models there where I think Finland could also learn a lot from other countries. We also did some very interesting stuff on, we did these kind of trials or tests, can you say? There were for many years in Finland, we were very interested in how you kind of get more data and info on what kind of policies works and what kind of policies do not. So in 2016, I think it was, we had a trial with universal basic income for a group of people. So we actually took this one proposal for policy and then we tested it. When I was a minister, we also had a trial with a 2-year preschool, because in Finland the system is like early childhood education and care from your 1 year till you start school, and the last one is called preschool. So we wanted to test if it was 2 years, then would we, especially for children who have more difficulties in learning, like would it benefit them? So we actually did like this huge test with universities involved, where we chose a group of children who would participate in the 2-year preschool, and then like a comparative group that did only 1, so that the university researchers then could follow up in years to come and see what the effect was, and so that we actually would get data, because sometimes it's quite hard to research educational policy, because you don't often get a situation where you have a comparative group. So if you do an educational policy reform, you usually do it for everyone, right? And then you don't actually know how it worked because you don't have an actual comparative group in the same situation. You just had the situation before. So we try to do all kinds of this kind of stuff, which I think is really important as well. That was quite inspirational also to think about, are there other policies that we can test in this way? Yeah, so I would maybe say that those things were inspirational when I was the minister. There was, I wish I could have done even more international work and learned more from other countries, but COVID made that quite difficult.
We have some more time, and I would like to ask you about vocational schools as well.
Yeah.
What are the challenges that vocational schools face in Finland, and how you think these challenges should be, what's the word for this?
Addressed?
Addressed, yes.
Yeah. Well, so after the primary education, so when you're around 16, there you have this element of segregation in a way, because you choose between the upper general, like a general upper secondary, and vocational education and training. And every time in educational systems, when you have that kind of structure, you will end up in a situation where, say, it will affect which kind of students are where. The vocational education system in Finland is quite good, it's quite attractive, so we have around half of the young choose that path and half choose the general upper secondary level. But the ones who choose the vocational education are more often working class, and they more often also have special needs. And these are also the biggest challenges for our vocational education system, that how can we address the needs of our students in the vocational education and training system, where we also, especially of the younger students, but we also have a lot of adult learners there. Around 60% of the students in vocational education and training in Finland are over 20, so they are adults. And among them, there's also a lot of people with special needs. So it's kind of growing the need within the vocational education system, but we have not been able to keep up with the kind of pace with which the need has increased. So I would say that is one of the biggest challenges. The other has to do with the system in Finland. I think is very well designed in a way that if you graduate from vocational education, you're eligible to continue anywhere. So you can apply for university with your degree from vocational education training if you want to, and if you have the kind of capacities then to get in. So on paper they are quite, like 100% equal, which is good, because then more students also choose vocational education because you don't close any door anywhere. A lot of countries have this closed door system where if you go to vocational education, that's kind of the end, then you're a worker and that's it. It's a very traditional, old school way of thinking. But this also means, which is a good thing, that for vocational education students, they also have, civics, languages, math, and so on, because then you have to have, of course, also teaching in these general subjects, so that you also have the skills to then continue with your studies on upper level. We also need to increase kind of quality in teaching in those subjects, so that we can make sure that the system is not equal, only on paper, but also in reality. And that's also been a big challenge for vocational education.
I think this is the last question we have time to, because if I open up another question, that it will be long. So I'm going to ask a short question. Something I noticed in your interviews, that you often refer to your party as your community that you get your support from. So what I would like to ask at last thing is that what keeps you and this community of yours motivated during these hard times of far-right governments all over?
I feel, in a way, like more motivated than ever. This is, my party colleagues sometimes tell me that that's a horrible thing to say in a way, but I sometimes kind of draw strength from the historical experiences of the left, because there has been times in Finland when the left was also like imprisoned, like in the 30s, and they still kept on doing what they were doing, and there are a lot of countries in Europe even, look at Russia and so on, where people are being imprisoned for what they believe in and they still keep on doing what they're doing. So I mean, I still live in an open democratic society where we don't have any, say, barriers for our political participation, but there are a lot of people who are affected by the cuts of the current government, that are struggling with how they will pay their rent every month, or single parents struggling with how they will pay for their, the clothes and food to their children. And I understand that they might not have, the energy or the resources to go out in the street or demonstrate and to try and write, a lot of stuff everywhere. So I think also that it is kind of the obligation for us who do have the resources and the possibilities to do something to change things. It is our obligation to do it for everyone else. Of course, our project should always be emancipatory in the way that we try to, get as many involved as possible, especially within the left, but I think we should also kind of see it as an obligation for those who can to do as much as we can, because then there's always a lot of people and a lot of families who don't, especially in economically difficult times, have the resources for it.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
having this interview, and enjoy your time in Budapest.
Thank you, I will. It's really nice to be here.
Thanks for tuning in. To find every other episode, follow our feed. This episode was produced by Lab-Left-nek. Thanks to everyone who made it possible.
Nagy szerelem.